The Appalachians of Israel are fairly loosely defined, and they were defined largely on political boundaries, not on geological boundaries.
Welcome to the Middle East.
Right. Yeah. Something about a border, and then the border changed, and then the border changed again. Everybody says it's theirs. What am I talking about?
Yeah.
So a lot of the Appalachians are very much politically defined rather than necessarily geologically or climatically or terroir defined.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, right now, the Israeli government has launched a massive program in collaboration with a couple hundred Israeli wineries to basically redefine the Israeli Appalachians and the Israeli wine map based on terroir.
Oh, nice.
And I'm going to get into terroir in a minute because you asked me about terroir, and I will explain that and make sure that anyone listening knows what that means and then how it applies to Israel. Mm-hmm. So the major regions, roughly north to south, you've got the Golan Heights and then the Galilee, subdivided into upper and lower Galilee. Mm-hmm. Then you've got the Shomron. Then as you head down, you've got the Judean hills and then also the Judean mountains, and there's some subregions there. And then you go down into the Negev. Those are like 5 or 6 major regions. Within there are some subdivisions, but ultimately, because the Appalachian laws in Israel are really lax and really ill-defined, you've got people putting all sorts of things on their labels and kind of not making it up, but just in a sense being like, oh, well, this is where it's from, so that's what I'm going to call it.
So are the Appalachians defined, the naming conventions, are they defined within Israel? Are they defined internally, or is it more like an international wine association? Who comes up with these naming conventions?
That's an internal thing. Every country has their own rules and laws. So yeah, it's a very, listen, I love Israel. It's a very Israeli thing. It's like, it's the Judean hills, or maybe you call it Judean mountains, whatever. It's wine. Just drink it. Right. But it's all defined internally. And really, for the very same reason that we went from 3 to 30 wineries, and they were all fairly industrial commercial wineries. And only now do we have hundreds of small boutique wineries. There was no demand or reason to have a more defined appellation structure. And now there is. Now that people are understanding the capacity of what Israeli wines can do, the Israeli government has responded by really leaning in. It's like, let's codify this on wine factors, not on border factors.
How recent is that, or at least the desire to be more concrete about the appellations?
So I don't know when this initiative started. I know it's in progress now. They're actively in progress of redrawing the appellations. And from what I hear, we're maybe a half a year or so out. I think COVID put a slowdown on that. So we have all these regions. Look, the reality is most of Israel is limestone and terra rossa. Mm-hmm. Those are the major soils, whether you're in the Judean hills or the Golan Heights or Galilee. Remember, Israel is small. It's a very, very similar soil. The thing about it is people think terroir is the dirt. And while that is an aspect of it, it is only one element.
Because it's in the name. Terroir is like earthiness, right? In French?
Yeah, loosely defined, yeah. But the terroir, it's not just that. It's the way I like to define terroir is this sense of place that allows you to eat, taste, or drink a product and know what that product is and where it came from. Wine is not the only thing with terroir. Olive oil has terroir. Cheese has terroir. Meat has terroir, right? That's why they're appellations. For instance, poulet de Bresse from France. It's a very specific type of chicken from Bresse, and it tastes very specific. And if you know what it tastes like, it could only be that. For Israel, the differentiating factors is less soil. Again, it's mostly limestone and terra rossa. It's more elevation, like up in the Golan and the Galil, you're much higher elevation. In the Judean hills, you're quite high elevation. In fact, when I show people photos of the Judean hills and I say, where do you think this is? I hear a lot, oh, that's like Sonoma. That looks like Sonoma Coast. Oh. I'm like, nope. That's Israel.
Wow.
I'll send you some photos. But yeah, so the terroir story of Israel is one that I think originally they're like, well, it's all the same rocks and dirt, so who cares? Like, here's where a road is, so that's the border of Shomron. And the Shomron plain versus the upper mountains. And like, okay, we're in the Judean hills, and this one's taller, so we'll call that the Judean mountains because it's a little taller, but it's not really a mountain. But now they're actually really trying to codify like what makes the grapes from this part of Israel taste different than the grapes from that part.
I hope you enjoyed this clip. And don't forget, this entire episode is available for free on YouTube, podcast players, and you can check out everything at jewishdrinking.com. Thank you so much for watching.